It was like, they were like about 7,800 apiece, or 7,700 something.
The new police officers.
Hey,
I can go back and print that.
Yes.
here, where the money's ever been given to North.
This is what I have.
Okay, remember the list I printed out? with
No,
the-
don't
with
leave.
the salary?
Oh,
That had all that.
And actually, have funded the library. I just asked, that building's not owned by the city, so, but you know, I'll
Okay.
say that publicly too.
Yeah,
but,
okay, all right.
It's not just,
Okay, yeah, and,
there's precedent, put it
yeah,
that
and
way.
precedent's important.
Just, but I'll bring that up here, I just want to let you know since you had mentioned that. There's also tons of precedents for the licensing that we're going to be talking about this evening.
Yeah,
That as well, just to see, but again, I'll bring that up.
Like the capital outlays, but it,
Katie, you think wants to start? Or-
No, as soon as she's ready. Go ahead.
Okay.
I could leave at some point, go down and get it. You know, that's just,
Stopping upstairs and I'll be down.
Kevin, sorry. He was in an interview.
I'd have to
Any
go downstairs
inkling
and get
of
it.
them putting their house next to Allen?
Well,
Soon.
yeah,
Print it
the
out, they have it
foundation's
somewhere.
in, so,
I might have,
and
I'm
they,
probably gonna print it out, but it
termite,
only takes a
got
minute.
people where they're spraying around the
here.
And so that's, place, I'll be fine, you know? That's my attitude now.
We are very,
I'm not gonna sleep in any airport.
we are very.
Okay. Wait for Bert.
Yeah, he'll be right back, sorry.
No problem.
Minneapolis.
We'll get started as soon as Mr. Dukes comes back.
Yes.
So the winters were not only enormously long, but enormously fierce, mean. And so I spent so much time waiting, and I had the luxury.
Hey, Steve.
I don't know.
I got from her, it's not accurate.
No, that was the first time I used it. You messaged me.
I can't fly unless it's very nice.
I think it bears talking about in terms of revenue and
You have all the documents.
Yeah.
Thief River Fault,
Oh, what? Are we ready?
you know, little planes.
Oh, there we go.
I didn't see the recording up
Thank
there,
you.
so I
Thank
didn't
you.
realize they were.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'd probably still be here today if we had done half
Yeah,
of what
right.
we forced ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll ask her so I can compare them or something.
I'll send it to you.
It's funny. It's funny, maybe in my next life, if I come back again, I'll be a little bit more laid back.
Yeah.
Did you drive her nuts?
Well, you know, probably not. Probably
My
more like,
second husband would always say, honey, that is not a drive, that's a short putt. I'm like, I don't like you. You were driving me crazy.
Hi.
And he'd be like, oh, no.
I'm Pat. Where were you from?
and then
I'm not
she
driving you
got me
crazy.
real good because of this crazy schedule.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Type A personality.
Oh, another taxpayer and voter? Dan Mills. Thanks.
Apologize.
Kids are
Had
resilient.
a couple of people
No problem. No problem.
heading out.
We're good.
We're ready when you are, Mayor.
Good marriages, it appears. That
We're going to call this meeting to order. This budget meeting, the second budget meeting. Just for the record, could you show that all 7 commissioners are present? And with that, I'll just turn it right over to the city manager.
Thank you.
Mayor, there was, just real quick, there was one piece of correspondence that came in for these budget discussions. It was from, it'll be entered into the record, but Clear Space Theater requested, some funding from the city to assist them in, permitting and other activities related to the building of their new proposed facility on Rehoboth Avenue. So I just wanted to mention that is being put into the record as well and for consideration.
Well, maybe we can cluster all the donation discussion together.
That's a good idea.
Yep.
Great.
City manager.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, public. We have once again, we have a balanced budget that we bring before you, iteration number 2 from the first meeting. This is the second meeting, of course. What we have done and what I'd like to concentrate on is the 5-year capital improvement plan. Our marching orders were to go back and prioritize that, which we did. Based on, I'll call it an urgency, and what you have before you are prioritizations with urgent, essential, deferrable, and desirable as the 4 categories. The yellow highlighted areas, I'd like to start with them. And basically, please know that in presenting the balanced budget, many of the essential items are not highlighted. They're not removed from the budget. They're not removed from the 2020 column, if you will. But only the highlighted areas as of now are in the balanced budget within each department. So if we start from the beginning, the Buildings and Grounds Department, and Director of Public Works is going to do his departments and explain that to you. The railings for the bandstand, $18,000, are there's an urgency to replace them as they're not quite intact and rusty, and for safety purposes, they need to be replaced. The next department is the Streets Department. Kevin?
Thank you. And thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. As Sharon said, we went back and tried to reprioritize amongst our essential items because of some fiscal constraints. So the trash truck, that's we're going to categorize as urgent because it's a replacement for an existing one that's going to the auction here this spring. So we need that to replenish our fleet. The Wilmington and Delaware Avenue, we kept prioritized within that category now as urgent. That's under the boardwalk storm sewer, as well as the first ocean block, or the ocean block of Delaware Avenue, where we have the existing known problems with condition of the pipe and the sinkholes that continue to develop along Delaware.
Kevin, would you prefer to go through your briefing or ask questions on the line items as you go through them?
I'll be happy to take it either way, so
Okay,
your preference.
Let me ask a question then. This may have been before your time, but last year, before budget season started, we had asked the city manager to look at ways of creating efficiencies in the way we're delivering services or to reduce expenses. And she came back with a great proposal, which is already saving our city some funding to lease our vehicles as opposed to purchase them. So that was a really great initiative. And we asked last year for the city manager to consider outsourcing, and I don't know if it's the right idea or not, but to conduct kind of a cost-benefit analysis and look at outsourcing trash services. So I'm wondering what the results of that analysis were, and if that's something that makes sense or not makes sense. And again, I have no idea. I'm not for it, against it. It just was something that we all thought should be looked at and, see if it's the right thing for the city.
Yes.
We did look at that, and Kevin can follow up, but we did look at that. We had some folks come in and talk to us about that, and I'll turn it over to Kevin. I just wanted to note that we did follow up
Great.
on that.
I knew you were going
Right,
to,
we
so I just
met with
wanted the
one group,
results.
I guess it's been a month or two ago now. And it really became an issue for them that they would have had to, it would have required a real reduction in service to the residents now. Because of the seasonality of it, they have the same issues a lot of people have. You staff up for the summer. They don't have a use for them like we would have with our streets department folks in the wintertime doing the rest of our prep for the season. And so that when they talked to us, they really weren't interested unless they could start off with, we're only going to do one day a year all year round because we want to keep that workforce. So it was not a very positive meeting with them. And that's kind of been the end of it after that.
So your recommendation is we continue providing that service
The
with our
thing that we
internal
have is there's
users.
such a need for those guys not on the trash truck in the winter, so we can keep them as full-time employees.
Okay, that makes sense.
Year-round, and they can do the off-season things that we need to do to get ready for the season.
Great. Sharon, Kevin, thank you for looking into that at least, so thanks.
They would love our business,
Yeah,
certainly. The problems associated with that are, I think, too insurmountable to even consider, including changing the size. They don't want to get out of the truck.
Sure.
So our guys, cater to the public, the residents here, and do a wonderful job at doing that.
Okay.
So
Great. Thank you. That answered my question. Thank you.
The other item under street department that we're able to keep in is the Lake Avenue streetscape. As we discussed last time, it's our piece of $1 million project. We would have to take advantage of that $800,000 grant money to do that. So those are the only ones that kind of made the recut.
When you're done with streets, I'd like to interject some.
Okay, I'm finished with streets.
Okay, and then I want to go back also, if you're willing, to the building and grounds. But again, I want to state very briefly my position that I've been consistent on over the years. To me, maintenance is the number one thing we need to do. And any new projects we take on have to have a maintenance component in them. And you know that last year I submitted 2 documents and slideshows, and to save you time, I'm not going to give them again. However, I did hand them out, and we'll embed them in the agenda later, because everything is still applicable. It gives my philosophy on all these things. But I guess the biggest thing for me is planning ahead. And I want to use the restroom as an example. As you know, I chair the Boardwalk and Beach Committee, and I'm a proponent of all those recommendations that came forward. And they're fairly extensive when it comes to restrooms. Restroom sufficiency, do we need more stalls and fixtures? Do we need more restrooms up at Deauville or Lake Girard, et cetera? How can we install a family restroom or restrooms on a year-round basis that are in a heated building, baby changing tables and all those things. And so when I look at your list here, it just says restroom rehab, I would like to know what the details are of that. I would like to know, for instance, if that means everything that we've ever talked about in the Boardwalk Committee, restaurant sufficiency, and you're going to put a new restroom somewhere and all that, then that's fine. But I suspected smaller steps. I would like to see that 5-year plan on these, because I'm at the point where I think at least the planning part of it and the design part of it is essential or urgent. I was up in, if anybody been up to Lewis recently, they got that brand new library. It's gorgeous. But you notice what's outside in the parking lot that was installed, I believe, with grant monies for the bicycle loop program. It's a beautiful, beautiful freestanding bathroom that helps with the bicycle loop, and it helps with anybody walking around Lewis. You know, I believe we are at the stage where we need to be considering that. Another building up in the north area, and if not, then expansion of our other one. But again, I can't read this and tell what is in here, because I am likely gonna, well, I'll say it now, that, you know, you've got one thing as urgent in there for the Baltimore Avenue restrooms. I would propose that we seek money to fund the other two rehab, restrooms to do at the same time, so they're ready for next summer, so that they're clean and sanitary, et cetera. And then if we all agree on that and fund that, then in future years, we have that same amount of money we could devote toward a new building or the family restrooms or expansions and those things like that. So that's where my mindset is now. And then I'm just gonna go back again to my thing about landscaping. And, you know, we've got tree planting, we've got landscaping, we've got gardens, we're putting in new gardens. And you know, I've had a fit over that. Every year I'm up here saying the same thing because we put in these new things, but we don't maintain the old things that we have. And I can cite different areas that it has nothing to do with our landscaping crew or personnel or Liz or anything. She put in a gorgeous re-landscaped garden over at Lake Gerard, but it got weeds the first week afterward, and then the weeds were prolific the rest of the summer in there. So we need, again, we do things, but we need that maintenance program. And so anyhow, please reread my notes from last year. Thank you.
And City Manager, maybe you can help me. The items that we have in yellow here, what is our goal today with these, since we're just on page 1? What is it that we actually want to do with the yellow? Because it kind of dovetails into, in the very first section under building and grounds, maybe you said this and I didn't catch it. The second one, which is the Baltimore Avenue restroom rehab, although it's listed as a priority of urgent, I think you did address this at the beginning. It's not in yellow yet. Is that fair?
So, once again, we reprioritized.
Right.
And added a new urgent category.
Yes.
So, under those urgencies, the ones that are highlighted are the ones that we were able to put together to balance the budget. Anything above and beyond, those that are highlighted yellow, and then the green section, which I'll explain again, are not in the budget at this current time.
In order to do that, did you have to drop any other projects?
Absolutely. These are all, we had a $5.2 million CIP, and we're down to $2.6 million
Okay,
approximately.
so I feel certain by the end of the presentation, we'll be able to see clearly what we've left off the table.
Well, you can go through each of these
Yeah.
pages and see clearly
Yeah.
anything that is not highlighted
Yeah.
is not in the budget.
And see how we feel
Respectfully,
about that. I
Commissioner
think to your
Mills,
point, Stan.
I'd say that there are many items in here that are not included in the budget. Do we think that it's an urgency? And the answer is yes. We'll explain them to you, why the Baltimore Avenue is urgent, if you'd like to have that detail, but it's not in the budget, as is many other items that are in the budget.
Well, I'm just trying to explain my position on these, and I do think it's more, if I can't sell the commissioners up here into seeking additional funding sources to fund those, then it's moved anyhow for another year. And I understand that. And back to Commissioner Sharp's note, that if you look down there at line 33, for instance, merge wayfinding signs. Hey, I love that program, but they've deferred it a year. And frankly, you know, if there are other things that rise to the top above that, then I will probably be fine with deferring it for a year, because to me, there's no absolutely critical time frame to get that wayfinding signage in there. It can come a year later, 2 years later, after Lewis does their thing. But again, we've all got priorities, so.
Well, I'd like to underscore one of the things that Commissioner Mills said. It would be helpful for these bathroom rehabs to really understand what the rehab is. Is it based on the program as presented by Commissioner Mills, or is it something else? So it would be helpful just to know.
And we have that detail we can certainly give to you. We
Yeah, just-
mentioned it last time.
Yes, so just email it or whatever makes
Right.
sense.
All of the restrooms, the three particular ones, were vetted with our EDIS folks, who would be supervisors, if you will, for bidding out the contracts and it's a total spruce up, I call it. So no new fixtures, but a total spruce up for 700,000 plus. The most urgent, according to the Director of Public Works, who vetted this with the building and ground superintendent, is the Baltimore Avenue restroom. So that's why that's urgent. And then the other two, still in the 2020 column, are not as urgent. So if we were going to do one at a time, and we could put it in the CIP and balance the budget, it would be Baltimore Avenue.
Right, but I just want to stress that this concept of planning, you know, that I hope that we're planning to put some family restrooms in, or family restrooms, and do some of these other things. And so if they're not in here, I'd like to see where they're in. You know, let's put money into plan and design now, even if it takes 2 years to fund a new restroom or a family restroom expansion or something. Then we'll have monies and we'll be able to look at this 5-year plan and say, hey, in 2 years, we're going to be doing that. So again, I'm willing this year in particular to put a lot of money into planning and investing time and money in that.
Can I go over to Commissioner Sharps? If you look at this sheet, and then you take into consideration everything that Sharon's put together, in this front sheet, the capital outlay or the capital improvement plan for 2019-20 is $2.6 million. And that includes everything in yellow and everything in green. And so what she's done is she's balanced the budget based on that capital improvement structure of 2.6 million, not the 5 million that we had last week. But as you can see on the bottom side of the page, there are certain increases that have created the ability to get that 2.6. Because remember, if last week we were only around 500,000 in the balanced budget. So some things were cut out and then some revenues put in. So as we look at the desirables or the essentials that we see either for this coming year or any other year as we move forward, we have to obviously keep in mind that we have to create money to get there. And she's already creating money to get where we are now that we haven't even talked about. So it is, you know, and I'm all for that with the bathrooms too. And I like the whole capital improvement plan across the board, the whole 5 million. But, you know, there are things, and that's why she's prioritized, and the Public Works Director has prioritized the specifics. And even though there are some urgents left out, it's mainly because we haven't been able to get to that point with the monies as of yet, so.
Well, I don't know, I can't speak for council, but I absolutely understand that this program, and that if we want things that aren't the green or yellow, that we've got to come up with new funding mechanisms. I agree with that. While you're on the front page, however, there's a mention of the hotel tax. Part of this budget, as I understand it, budgets 3% of a room rate tax. And I disagree that that's even in here. We have not talked about that. I think it's the wrong message to print in the paper, to send out to the business community that we are putting 3% room rate tax into the budget. Even though it hadn't been vetted, what are they going to think? You know, they're going to think it's a done deal. And to me, it's not a done deal. You know, whether it's 1%, 2%, 3%, a portion of that, or whether we hold off and defer a year. Because remember, the General Assembly has not and is likely not going to approve that by the time we finish this budget session. So I hesitate to include that in there. Do you know how much that 3% is?
3%?
Yeah.
What's budgeted is 855,000 starting July 1. That we gave it that amount of time, we think, to get it through the legislature and signed by the governor. So I heard planning, and yeah, I'm all about that. This is a draft budget. This is a recommendation to balance the budget. Otherwise, we're going to remove 855,000 from somewhere because we have to. So that was a suggestion just how to get there. Certainly, it's not my you know, my undertaking. No, certainly it hasn't been vetted, but it has been voted on by the commissioners, and it's in process at least to get it through the legislature. I know the mayor has discussed it with the elected state folks, and it was just a way of, you know, again, to reprioritize this and to see what you could see what could be in here with that amount of money.
I'd rather discuss that and know up here that we've got that extra funding mechanism that we might be able to use if the General Assembly approves it. But again, I don't think it should be in here. I think it kind of could potentially mislead us a little bit, and that we need to know that that's an extra $855,000 that we've got to come up with.
Just to go into that subject, I was up in Dover this week, and as you all know, HB 34 did pass committee, and it's going to go in front of the legislature, and that's some of the election changes that we made. Also in front of the legislators, and I spoke with Speaker of the House Schwarzkopf, and hopefully they may be able to get that in front of the legislatures as early as March, and this is a charter change that the commissioners approved back in the fall to be able to request some type of an accommodations tax, not put a specific number on it as of yet, that would be down the road, but this would give us the opportunity to change the charter so that we could request a tax. He gave me the indication that conceivably, again, if they can get it in there in March, I think it's anywhere from 30 to 60 days that it may be voted on by the general legislature. So I know the city manager put that in as of July 1st in the hope that we get it passed. We did discuss it a bit, but obviously between now and any time we would implement some type of an accommodations tax, we would have further discussion. And I think that discussion will take place as we get closer to maybe it passed through the committee and then we go from that point. So it's in here as a possibility, but again, as you've said, it's $850,000 and it's part of this 2.6 capital outlay that we have, and it's part of a balanced budget that we have at the moment. And so if we do take it out, then certain things will fall
You
by
know,
the wayside.
I think it's really helpful to know that the 3% equates to $855,000. So that's great. The only thing we don't want to send the message that we're raising or we're putting a hotel tax into place for 3%, because we really haven't decided. It could be 2%, it could be 4%. Probably not 10%, but.
I really agree with Commissioner Mills that it
not-
should be taken out of the budget now for planning purposes, because we haven't vetted this, we haven't, really gotten feedback from the community. It just seems too early to put this in. It's almost making an assumption when we really have had very little public discussion with those impacted at this point, so.
I don't mind knowing about it so
Yes.
we can put it in the equation of how we move forward. It's just that I don't want people to think that this is what it is.
That's
all.
right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'd like a quick correction, Pat. You said we don't know whether it's going to be 3%, 4%.
Yeah.
Remember, our charter change asked for a maximum of 3%. And actually, I think that's what
there
the
you go.
General Assembly
Okay.
set an upper limit anyhow.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I'm certainly happy to take it out of the next iteration. I just wanted to go through the CIP to highlight again those areas that we were able to keep in that are urgent. So there's, continual decisions that have to be made here. You'll recall at least three of you, I think, 2 years ago, Mr. Dukes did a similar comparison and highlighted colors and called it what we could do A, what we could do B, recall that, and what we could
Yep.
do
Very helpful.
with.
Very helpful.
So this is kind of the same thing, what we could do with that. However, this is in there, and we'll certainly remove it in the next iteration, just, and come up with that difference. Do you-
Before we get into, were you still talking, Stan? Please go ahead. Please finish,
I
yeah.
never stop. I noticed you have Big Belly cans in there. I think a lot of us were excited to do a trial on that. And I mean, 35,000, I guess, is a purchase of multiple units. I don't know if you could do your trial with just one unit and whether they would rent them so that we could possibly get that in this year. Again, because it's for a trial basis, you got to start at some point. And I know that years ago, I tried to ask if we could just borrow some and try them, and there was a delivery fee and some kind of small rental fee at that time, so it was not free, in other words.
So that line includes 2 blocks, I guess Ocean Block, 1 Ocean Block, 1 Second Block, and Grove Park. So it was 6 on each of those blocks for 12, and then the remainder in Grove Park, which I think were 3, 5 total.
What line number is
5
this?
at Grove,
5
Oh, I
at
see,
Grove,
20.
yeah.
Okay.
5 at Grove,
5 at Grove. Mhm.
so 17 total.
12 and 5, yes. Mhm. But I think we can go back to them and see if there's a better, maybe a 1 block and a couple in Grove kind of
Well, we've also
option
got
too.
E-Cube, a competitor. I don't know
Right.
what their program is. I mean, I'm sure you vetted one over the other to see.
Well, we
but-
did talk about that with the manufacturer, and we're hoping to get grant funding through, Evans suggested that actually through the recycling folks and the state folks. So to be able to include that, it's in there. It's an exciting program. We'd like to, get it going and develop it.
Yeah, and one thing I'll mention on that too is it would essentially be the same grant application that the city applied for the recycling center. But because it is a recycling grant, I imagine that the upcoming fiscal year, they would only fund the recycling portion of a Big Belly. So the Big Bellies have a single station that could be just used for solid waste, but they can also have a double station, which would be solid waste and recycling. So I imagine if we were to go ahead and apply for the grant, the funding would be available for the recycling portion of the Big Belly. So, and I've been in contact with them to consider a Big Belly trash can as an option that would be applicable under that grant. So.
Do you want to move on to the highlighted?
Yeah,
yellow,
that's
or-
what I'm thinking, is let's move on to the yellow highlighted, because as it is right now, we've already taken out 850,000, but I think it's important for everyone to see exactly what is urgent based on either your calculations or the Public Works Director, and then we can back up and figure out how we pay for it. And then we can-
reiterate the green ones.
Just real quick, though, are we gonna, like, we're talking the tactics, and then we're gonna come back and look at, and talk through what you have up on the, I mean, it just seems to me there's a couple of things I'd like to understand from the overall picture as we're discussing the more tactical requests and line items. So, for example, how much now, Bert, is in the contingency fund? Like, you've broken out revenue expenses in our operating budget, but I know we also have a contingency fund where we put aside some funding. How much is it in our contingency fund at this point?
378,000 in the contingency budget.
That's it? I thought
Well,
it
that's
was.
pretty large. I mean, the idea of the contingency is to
Yeah.
protect yourself against unexpected
Yeah, yeah.
expenses, not to use it for things you're gonna,
Exactly,
plan on.
absolutely. That's, so it's 370K,
378,000.
thousand. Okay, thank you. And,
Excuse me, just to better understand.
no,
this,
sure.
because I'm not aware
That's
of
why I
it.
brought it up, actually, yeah.
What is the source of those funds? Were those specifically budgeted to set aside in one point?
Well, I mean, they're budgeted in the revenue. I mean, they're really in the middle section up here. But, so we budgeted revenue for that, but we don't know exactly what's going to hit us.
Oh,
So
yeah,
it's-
I understand the
it's-
purpose, but I'm just wondering the source of those funds.
Well, it's really general revenues.
Surplus, something.
And so it's been set aside little by little each budget year in order to.
Well,
build this?
there's
Slips.
really no physical cash sitting there. I mean, basically, it's an anticipated expense for the coming year. Well, hopefully, we don't have to use it. And last year, we didn't have to. Well, we used it last year, but most years, we don't touch it. So
What did we use it for last year?
one of the things we use it for is we had the Del Dot trash removal, and it was used for some of that. You know, it used to be in the trash department's budget, and it's about 200,000.
We also used it for Munis training. We needed additional training, additional hours to get the property tax up and running, and the other segments that we were able to accomplish this year. So every time we need training, there's additional funding is needed. And we can go in whatever order you'd like, so I just was tying the CIP into the budget. If you'd like to discuss this, that's fine.
I just, because it's setting the stage and it's causing me to think differently about the CIP and understanding the bigger picture of the budget. Also trade-offs, and maybe this will come later, but I know you had sent out the note about the one new position, which I'm totally in support of, the project coordinator. However, I then asked the question, are we adding other new positions into this year's budget, and how much is that in this year's budget? I just as we're thinking through this and thinking through trade-offs, like I'd like to have that number in my mind. So I think you're recommending 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14 additional seasonal employees, some for the police department, parking, and beach patrol that you've built into the budget. What's the cost of those additional positions?
The seasonals are approximately 90,000. 68,000 for the 8 seasonal police officers, and 10 for the additional code compliance folks, I'll call them, in the beach patrol, and approximately $10,000.
For the whole season?
Yes,
Okay, so the total for the whole season for those positions is 68, 90K
correct,
for those 3? Okay,
approximately.
all right, all right.
And
I
then
mean, I still don't know, like, if I agree with that. I don't know when or if we're going to discuss it. I know it's only 90K, but 90K pays for bathroom design or something else. And I mean, I think we had a discussion about, clean, safe, friendly, and as our vision. And, we're becoming more, we continuously add positions and spend money on compliance, as opposed to hospitality or something else. So I'd like to, or something else for our citizens or visitors. So I don't know when and how we discuss those particular expenditures and where the trade-off is. I'm open to suggestion, but other than the one position on a project and grant person, which I think we need, I'm not sure we want to spend 90K
Yeah, well,
on seasonal people.
I think the
I'm
chief
just
was
not
here.
sure.
Were you here when the?
Chief was here, yeah, I
Yeah,
was
he
there.
talked
So I'm
about-
not sure I disagree with that, but now
Yeah.
I'm seeing it in the context of 90K for more, and he explained actually pretty well what he wanted to do, which is more ambassadors, not
Right.
enforcement. But
Right.
yet we're adding another 20K for more enforcement folks, so.
But that enforcement is the lifeguards, the people that go by and say you can't smoke here, and the people that say your tent isn't allowed. It's basically the clean, safe, friendly that we're doing on a seasonal
It
basis.
sounds
up on the
friendly to
beach.
me. I mean, so it
Well,
sounds like
but
compliance.
again, it's just like the 8 seasonal officers. We've heard that people think that it's a little unsafe on the boardwalk. So what the chief said, there's no safety issue from a statistical perspective, but from the perspective of people walking up and down the boardwalk, this was a way to make people feel more comfortable. Same thing with the stuff out on the beach. And this $90,000, and not to say $90,000 isn't a lot of money, but it's a lot of money going towards what we've been talking about, whether it's in Commissioner Mills or you've said it, the clean, safe, friendly, making people feel more comfortable, and the tourism. And I think just about every one of these new additions go that direction.
Well, I mean, maybe it sounds like everybody else is fine with spending more money on compliance and continuing our path towards becoming a town of compliance as opposed to a friendly town. So if that's how everybody else feels, I will state publicly for the record that I don't agree with more compliance funding.
Well, I think it's the clean and
so-
safe. I mean, that's,
Safe, yeah.
yeah, I mean, as far as compliance, the
But
smoke.
5
peop-
additional folks, 20K, there's a lot we can do with 20K in the
No,
budget.
I mean, I
above
know
and
there's a lot
beyond.
we can do, and
So-
we could just say, well, we won't, as far as the smoking in the tents, we just won't worry about it. There won't be anybody except for people to complain.
Well, there was only a couple of
I mean, I don't
tent
know-
violations last year, and
Yeah.
and there's more police officers if we go with the additional seasonal officers. It just
Well,
seems to me
that's
these
true.
are
Maybe-
little
maybe they-
things
They're
we should
mostly
be
nighttime.
discussing.
Okay.
You know, because they're trade-offs. I mean, do we want 5 more compliance officers, or do we want 20K to go to improving a bathroom? I think that those are important things to discuss.
What you don't see in here, I just want to point that out, because they're not, it's part of contracted services, so they're not additional bodies, if you will. But to be absolutely clear, there is an additional $80,000 in contracted services that the Boardwalk and Beach Committee recommended for an attendant in each of the 3 restrooms during the seasonal months. So there's a male and a female in each. It's not hidden by any means. It's just in the contractual services
And that's
point.
that's an additional.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. And there is as we discussed last time, a school resource officer for
Yes.
approximately.
No, I understand the police department, I think in general, but seeing it in the context of all the other ones is the question I had. So those are my 2 questions on this, so thank you.
So if we continue on, we did streets, and then the next highlighted area you'll see is in the parking department. The green highlighted area was in there last time. I brought that to your attention. You gave me permission to contact the folks at T2, which, so now that the meters and the software that goes along with that is on order. So thank you for allowing me to do that. The next highlighted area is the van for the cargo van. That's part of the enterprise leasing that Commissioner Schlosser mentioned. So that's $8,540. That's urgent because we need it in order to implement everything green right above that. Going down to the police department, there's, those 2 vehicles are again in the enterprise leasing. And then we go on to the sewer department, so I'll turn it over to the director.
So we'll pick up on line 74 for those following along. One of the concepts we wanted to try to ensure we stood behind was all of the things that had been in the Abraham's rate analysis report and the requirement to raise a certain percentage. We wanted to make sure we have those in there. We didn't want to raise the sewer rates a certain rate and then not do the projects that they said we had to do as a part of that. So in those included the sewer system inspection program, where we get into those clay pipes and just see what the conditions are and determine the conditions that we have in the field. The sewer vac truck, the one we have now, is on its last leg and really not of, it's of minimal use to us at this point, so this would be a replacement vehicle for that. The doors, although they weren't listed in the report, we have, these are at our pump stations, and we're very close to having a physical security issue. The doors are just in such bad shape. We need to replace four doors a door at 4 of our pump stations. The sludge pump is at one of our pump stations as well. That's also in that Abraham's rate study analysis. And then the fleet vehicle would tie back to the earlier discussion about the enterprise lease. Would highlight the next one, although it is not highlighted, the proceeding with the phase 3 of the design of the immediately urgent repairs at the wastewater treatment plant. It's in the budget, not highlighted because our plan is to use the SRF funds for that, and the payments for those would not start this year while we're doing the design. So it shows as essential, shows as there, but there won't be a fiscal outlay associated with it this year. Now moving down to the water department, same kind of philosophy as to what was included in the report. The water main replacement program, although the new late-breaking addition was the filter media replacement at the Lynch Well site. We have 4 large carbon filtration units at the site. This is to replace, we had them inspected this fall. It was in last year's budget, so they were inspected this fall. And then we got the results back, and the carbon media itself is overdue to be replaced, so we're getting that into the budget to get replaced. And then similar discussion on the 2 fleet vehicles from Enterprise. And I think that's it for the water.
Thank you. The IT department, these are copier replacements that they handle, computer lifecycle replacements that are on an annual basis, the cameras for the streets department, and portable radios that are urgently needed.
Sharon, the cameras and the radios, is that new equipment?
Yes,
Just new because others are needing to be replaced?
yes.
Thank you.
So that takes care of the urgent needs of the department. Again, we classified urgent, but did not highlight some of them, as you see, and then moved some to the next year, 2021, and then listed for you what is essential, deferrable, and desirable for each year. Bert, if you were next to go through the budget summary, if you can just take us through that.
Well, we're talking about the highlights?
Yes.
I presented the budget in a format that I thought might be helpful, so it could put a little focus on the capital budget. And the 2.6 million, I think that's what Sharon and Kevin are working through with you. We have expenses, or revenues in excess of expenses right now of about $98,000. There'll probably be some more reviews and tweaks to several things, but basically we have a $23 million budget for almost a $15 million general fund budget, a water fund budget of $3.2 million, and a wastewater fund of almost $5 million. And operating expenses for the general fund, $14,223,000. The water fund, $2,184,000, and the wastewater fund is $4 million. Now, in the wastewater fund, it's higher than a normal year, and it's going to stay higher because of the debt service that's associated with it.
Any questions?
So just to reiterate what we already spoke about, technically, since we had the conversation, it's really not, we're not balanced with a $98,000 surplus. We're basically deficit of about $760,000 based on removing the accommodations tax.
That'd be correct.
And we'll put
And-
that through in the next iteration.
Okay, I'm sorry, Bert, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I think I'm done.
Okay,
But please note, we'll have to change the CIP certainly, and, some other areas. What we did look at is level funding the current year's budget with next year's budget. That would certainly do the trick, if you will. But the general operating budget, as any business, as we are, big business, has inherent additional costs in it that just don't relate to personnel costs. They're operations of each department. Mr. Molina is here as the next department head to present his budget, if you'd like to hear from him. Is that okay? Yep.
I just have one question. I'm not 100% sure how to ask this yet for Bert, but I noticed in the assumptions this page here that we're assuming that metered wastewater rates will increase 60%, right?
That's correct.
That's an assumption. Are these the same rates that have been increasing since 2009? You know, is that the same thing, the sewer surcharge?
the
Is
sewer
that two different
surcharge-
things, or is that the same thing?
Sewer surcharge is equal to 50% of our metered sewer rate and our flat fees associated with the sewer. So basically, the total amount of those, 50% of that equals a sewer surcharge. What we're talking about is the increase that's been recommended by the Abrams Group to service the debt and costs associated with the outfall and improvements to the plant.
So it's two different increases. The sewer surcharge is something different than the wastewater surcharge?
Well, no, the sewer surcharge is equal to half of your metered sewer, because we're up to, we introduced a sewer surcharge in 2009. I
Right.
think it started at 10%.
Yeah.
And then it increased over the years, and it's been at 50%.
Right.
So the revenue that's in the sewer surcharge, I mean, basically, people see it on their
Yeah.
bill, that it's equal to 50% of what they used
Right.
on meter services plus the flat fee.
So that'll still be on our bill plus another 60%.
Well, that's right. I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, you basically can say that the surcharge is going to go up 60%, and
Right.
the metered sewer is going up 60%. The metered sewer, we use the water usage and multiply it times the rate that the commissioners established. So that rate, I don't have off the top of my head right now, but I mean, in an aggregate basis, you can just say 60% of the sewer rate that we have now.
Yeah, so that's what we had been talking about, and Abraham's had put in front of us, that as they're looking at our abilities to pay for operations and maintenance, as well as debt service moving forward, as well as looking into some of the things that we have to do down at the plant, they figured that our bills have how much per gallon of water, we have a fixed fee, as well as we have that surcharge. And so basically, your bill adds up to $100. So as of next year, that same bill will be $160. And so it's really 60% higher across whatever your bill is today. And that's an approximate, but that's yet to be determined. But that's what's
So it'll still be, the 50% surcharge will show up, plus there'll be 60%.
based on our structure
Gotcha.
today, yes. And the same is in there for water being 30%, but they don't have those same charges. Right. Okay. Thanks, Mark. Done?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Dawn.
Thank you.
Dom?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. I'd like to review my budget, but one of the things I will hope you appreciate is that we are a performance department. I mean, we're a code enforcement and so forth, but we're a performance department, and we are a sustainable department. Okay, so what I have to present is, yes, we have had increases between our revised budget and our actual budget, but the categories where I could pick out those categories where we have had the increases between the 2018 and what was proposed for 2018 and where we are at the actual. if you go to page 5, which is the first page that I have, hopefully is yours, you go to the fund 51,000, you'll see a modest increase in salaries there from what was projected in 2018 and where the actual is. The other categories, the next 4 categories of which we didn't have control was the FICA, the medical, Medicare, medical insurance, and dental. And because we had additional staff, we have an increase in uniforms. Is everyone okay? Did I walk you through okay? Okay, thank you. But what you need to understand that despite we have had these increases in these categories, we have also demonstrated a reduction in other categories. And primarily, if you go to the second page, is the account 5511-500, other professional service. When I first came into work as the department head, we had a contractual service of up to $50,000. And we were relying on a third-party agency doing a lot of our work. That's when we were behind in our plan reviews and so forth. Now that reliance is down to $2,500. We budgeted last year to $5,100, and now we're at $2,500 in expenses. That is primarily when we hire an engineer to do technical review. But most of our, I would say all of our plan reviews are now conducted in-house. So that reliance that we had before on an outside party, which was AECom, has totally diminished. Also, what was budgeted in deduction also as well, you had your travel and conference training. Through research, myself and members of our staff, we've been able to find free training through FEMA. A lot of the training has been offered through FEMA and locally as well. The only thing is they give you the training free, but you have to compensate for travel and for boarding. Our vehicle, when we get to 52-1000, our vehicle maintenance is gone slightly up because our fleet is older. Well, we have the old pickup and the old Prius, and now that should stay stable with the acquisition of a new car, and the maintenance is performed outside as well. So if you have any questions regarding any of this presentation, please let me know, because I want to jump into the additional information I've given you.
Dom, can you talk a little about the, regarding the training, the accomplishments? I know, we've put that before the commissioners, but just to recap it maybe for the public.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me. Our staff, in building and licensing is one of the few, or one of the departments in the state that is fully certified. Joanne became a permit technician. Matt is a building inspector, a plans examiner, and a residential inspector. Dennis is a property maintenance certified property maintenance inspector, our certified floodplain manager, permit technician as well, and he is now heading to become our certified zoning official as well. He's scheduled to take tests next week. And myself, I have had 14 certifications. Of what I'm trying to do is continue my education for them to maintain them. So.
Thank you, Dom. That's quite an accomplishment. Thank you.
Thank you. I also want you to take a look at the attachment or the other information I gave you for budget year 2017, 2018, and 2018 and 2019. Based on what we have accomplished on 2017 to 2018, and when you look at 2018, we're about 30%, 37, almost 40% short of accomplishment those figures. Again, now, I'm hoping that in the wisdom of everyone here present, the city manager, the budget officer, that we'll be able to address such CEP projects like your concern, Mr. Stan Mills and Ms. Schlosser, that yes, we are performing, but the performance needs to be placed back into programs that the municipality wishes to attain. So we'll do our end of our work, and we're hoping that everyone collectively pays attention to what we are able to provide. And that's why I'm saying we're a performance program department, and we hopefully will continue to be so. Thank you. Any questions?
Thanks, Don.
All right.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Dom.
All right.
Thing that you have outstanding, commissioners, that you'd like to discuss here?
I think, I'm hoping we're going to talk about tapping into other revenue sources. Is that today?
Yeah, definitely. And what I'd like to do before we get to that is emphasize some of the things that are on the CIP that we're not looking at based on today's, that are, I think, pretty important. And the ones, and I went all the way back to, building and grounds. I thought to myself, one of those bathrooms should be done. That's $220,000, the urgent on Baltimore. I go down to streets, and the citywide paving that we started last year, it's not in the CIP. That's pretty disturbing. It's $450,000.
What line is that?
That is line 16.
16.
As I look at, we've been talking about in the last year or so, stormwater pretty substantially. And this, the construction phase of Bayard, I know it's in 2 phases, but, I know we've all talked about that as being pretty essential. And then, the next line on line 18, the storm sewer, CT cameras, that our engineer has suggested that we do, one zone over the next 5 years. And then I think that's pretty much so it, but we're talking right there, that's $1.2 million of what we were looking at long and hard last year. And again, as the citywide paving, we did find a way to put that in. But, not only are we at a negative right now, but these are things that I think we should be, above and beyond maybe something that, smaller things that we might be able to accomplish. These are pretty big things that we need to seriously consider whether we can get away with not doing something about those this year. I mean, I think the citywide paving's been very successful this year. I think a lot of people have noticed it. But just like a lot of other things around town, there is deferred maintenance that's been put off for years that we really can't lose focus of. We can't lose sight of. So just something to mention.
I would just like to offer that the exercise for me is trying to figure out how do we afford these critical items. And I think it goes to Commissioner Calusi, the additional revenue
Yeah, no.
discussions.
I've been looking at, which we will, I guess, get into, I've been looking at several areas, and I'm looking forward to talking about them.
Yeah, and I think it's something that it's good to have the discussion as early as possible, because these are things that are, if they happen this year, okay, but I mean, if we look at this CIP and we're pretty serious about it, and I think we all are, it's something that is going to probably continue. It's not like something we do this year and then we don't have to do it for 5 years. It's something that we're going to have to consider as we move forward across the board.
Well, before we go to that talk, because I think that's worthwhile, I think I know there's a lot more on here that I would prefer to get in this year's budget. You know, and Paul mentioned some, you've heard me before about the restrooms, facilities doing more. I noticed on the last page, line 117, the Lake Gerard Accretion Restoration Project has now been deferred another year. Remember, we were going to do
deferred it
this,
last
we were
year.
going to do this last year in budget monies.
Yep.
And we deferred to do, if you recall, former Commissioner Jay Legree recommended deferring till we do a more holistic approach. Well, that never came to fruition, so now we're going to be pushing it off a year. I understand it all, I just think at some point, we've got to bite the bullet and do these things. Otherwise, 10 years from now, it will have already accreted, and then we're not going to need to do that because it's reduced in size.
Well, those
Can
are-
somebody explain to me real quick, on that last page, we've got, in the green, Sharon, you've got budgeted $458,000 in the green. The urgents are $2,164,000. Those are already in the budget.
Correct.
So the 2.6 million are the essentials that we haven't funded yet?
No, they're all the yellow. They're everything that's highlighted in yellow.
The green is the parking
Yeah, the
that we
green is the
have to
parking.
do.
Right?
Yeah, it's the
And-
addition of the two.
Yeah.
It's
see
the
these
addition
things?
of the two, right? The green and the
Oh,
yellow.
that's just the total?
Yeah, the green and the
Okay.
yellow.
So what's the balance? What's, based on last time, we've still potentially got $2.5 million worth of things unfunded if we did everything that was essential or urgent on here.
Yeah, well, I mean, basically, what she put in front of us was all the green, all the yellows highlighted were in her balanced budget, but using that accommodation status. So it does not include any other urgents or essentials that aren't highlighted. So,
And Commissioner, if I could just interject one thing. I know it's a very small piece of that big number, but the Lake Gerard piece, we intentionally moved that another year because we didn't want to do that prior to doing the streetscape and have all the disturbance and runoff associated with that. We wanted to do the cleanup of that portion of the lake after we get done the streetscape project.
With the Lake Avenue one.
Yes, right along Lake Avenue.
That's valid, I
But
think.
small piece and a big number.
That's valid. It doesn't mean we can't fund it this year or put it all, it's all on priorities, absolutely.
Can I
My
ask you-
point is that
oh, sorry.
I think that if we came up with $2 million, or whatever we came up with, we would fund a lot more projects that I think are needed in this cycle, not being postponed.
No,
to
I
the other side.
absolutely agree. And I think I think we need to focus on trying to find revenue, tap some sources that I think are either untapped. Some of them, it's small from my perspective. I've looked at this in detail. And anyway, I don't know when you.
So I tell you where I'm getting lost. The 4 line items that the mayor just mentioned for an additional 1.2 million.
Yes.
What I'm trying to get to is, what is the total of the rest of the projects on here that would increase this 1.2 million that we would have to be looking for revenue to fund?
I mean, in other words, you're looking at the wish list for the commissioner sitting up here of the additional things that are listed?
Well, I don't know if it's a wish list.
wish list, it's an essential.
It's an essential,
Yeah.
essential.
Well, it's been vetted by the city manager
right?
as essentials and desirables and urgents. And I think it would be helpful to know the total of that, I think.
Sure.
Well, and I think it might be helpful to go down the list individually, if you will, just like Commissioner Mills just did, and saying that, you know, yes, it's been put off a year, kind of desirable, but maybe we can fund that Lake Gerard thing this year. So, I mean, that's,
Some of those smaller ones I think we ought to look at because those we could possibly fit in. But the other thing I think would be valuable is, I think there's a number of things on here that we could potentially get grants for. like the LED, some of the energy saving things, the recycling, if those could be identified. I know you're always looking at grants, you may know some in here already. So if we knew that, that would, I think, be helpful, so then we don't have to sit there and figure out, how do we fund the big belly trash cans if in fact we can get half of it? We really only have to fund half of it. You know, that's, I think would be very helpful.
That's a good idea.
So would it be helpful to have a total for all the urgents that are white and all the essentials that are white?
Well, it would be for me because I've already circled 4 that the mayor just
Right,
put up
as did I.
and would like to circle some additional ones. Because hence, it seems to me we get a total or a ballpark idea of what we're looking for.
Well, is that something that Evan?
Yes, we're
can
doing
do
it right now.
Right this
Well,
minute? I
yes.
think that would be helpful. I mean, I don't know,
Right
I
this
don't know the
minute.
best way to approach this, you know, looking at that and then saying, that's X million, we want to come up with it.
Yeah.
Or whether we look at other revenues and do a reasonable rationale for increasing other funding sources and then
So
fund.
backing into it is what you're talking about.
Well, or you adopt the philosophy, we decide what's the total of our essentials and how can we afford that?
Well, currently, the total of the yellow highlight, as you see there, is $2,164,675, and that includes,
There, yeah.
Right.
So how about urgent that's non-yellow, in other words, white? And then how much for the essentials that are all also white?
So there was, I guess, one urgent that was not highlighted yellow, which would be the Baltimore Avenue restroom rehab under Building and Grounds. So I've lumped that in with the rest of the essential projects that haven't been highlighted for a total of 2.1 million. And then if you were to add that to the existing 2.6 million, it's a total of 4.7.
Yeah, but you can't add them because those yellow highlighted ones are already funded.
Correct. So then it would be 2,157,354
Or does it complicate,
for
That's
essential.
the third level.
Essentials.
or does it complicate that we need to remove that 855,000?
well, that's true. So if we remove that, which that's additional, taken from the
Add it in, so
2 million.
it becomes a $3 million.
But anything that we come up with is going to be tapping some income sources, and one of them could very well be the hotel tax. One could very well be increase in property tax. There's a variety of things that we can look at. And I think we want to, in my mind, and it should be discussed here now, how do we feel about the hotel tax? Do we want to look forward to perhaps doing 3% moving forward? Or maybe if we're looking at other income sources, we could say, oh, we really could do 2% and get some income from some other sources. But those are the conversations I want to have.
I'd like to spread it around, I guess, but I'd also like to try to identify some of these as visitor enhancements. And so what does our extra parking revenue go to, or should it go to the visitor enhancements such as the restroom and the new Parkeon meters?
Well, I think any extra parking revenue should go right towards those Parkeons, because, I mean, that's almost $500,000, and I don't necessarily think that you guys have budgeted for our parking revenues to go up that much. No, so, I mean, whatever we do have, obviously, that can go that way, but I think a lot of these things are, unfortunately, the big picture, all over town, not just a specific, like, okay, the hotel tax, I think, is gonna go towards, whether it's the beach, the boardwalk, police, trash pickup, the things that we're already paying for not like specifically for a lifeguard stand or something like that, that you can see from the hotel. I mean, I think a lot of these things that are on the urgent list, as well as even the essential list, are things that are citywide that have to do with infrastructure. I mean, I think if you look down these numbers, the majority of this is infrastructure or something tied to infrastructure. You know, whether it's those CCT cameras or the pump stations or whatever. So I don't know that we can actually say, all right, this revenue is going to go here to this at this point in time. Now, if we ever got to a point in time where we were figuring parking revenues are going to go up 500,000, then I think we could probably say, okay, and where's that 500,000 going to go to? I think this next time around is to $500,000 worth of parking equipment, or to, you know, 2 more staff members, something. But I think if you look across these essentials, most of them are of the infrastructure, with the exception of the parking stuff.
I have like a general question before we get into just the revenue discussion. And it goes towards planning and you know, kind of more strategic and long-term planning. Last year, when we created this kind of first formal CIP, we put out a priority for things like, well, let's have a multi-year paving program and make sure that, you know, we fund that paving program. And, you know, so it seems and then we're adding new things here to the capital improvement plan. So, for example, a new trash truck for $162,000. The sewer system CCTVs. I'm wondering, I just kind of want to hear the thinking from Kevin and Sharon on, you know, why we're adding kind of new things to the capital improvement, you know, plan, when last year we kind of made a strategic decision to fund certain things on an annual basis. So, to me, like we're just kind of, right now, it sounds like, okay, well, let's just accept what this is. And maybe that's what we want to do. I don't know. But it seems to go against the whole principle of having a long-term, multi-year capital improvement plan. So I just kind of want to understand your thinking a little bit on that. And I'm sure you reasoned it out, but I'd like to just understand that.
I can sum it up by saying that we have a Director of Public Works for 7 months. And that's some of the reasons for these changes. Certainly, we have planned. Just want to remind you that the citywide paving program was in the budget for the last 5 years. It was not funded fully. So that's why it went from 250 to 450, because again,
Now
we did.
it's zero in the budget at this point.
It's very important, absolutely. But what happened, as to address your concern, is the trash truck that we had, the 25-yard trash truck, is no longer operable, and we need a new trash truck in order to deliver those services. As we move forward with this 5-year CIP, we're going to have a plan in place to replace the vehicles, so it's not a surprise. That's part of the planning process. And I'll have Kevin address the sewer inspection and the sewer vacuum truck, and, you know, those things that are related to Public Works. We now have a plan, and Kevin can talk about the priority of that plan. So I just have a question for the Director of Public Works. If we did not, because this is new, as Commissioner Schlosser is saying, so if we did not include in here the repairs under the boardwalk, looking at line, what line am I looking at? Yes, line 14. So what would happen if we didn't do that, Director of Public Works?
Good question.
2 things. 1, nothing, or 2, the boardwalk could collapse. You know, so the boardwalk, if we get the kind of sinkholes, well, first let me back up. So we've done the video of those pipes. They're old corrugated metal pipes, so we know there's no bottoms left in them. In many cases, many places, the sides are kind of deteriorated. So as that happens and water runs through the pipe, it erodes that out, causes the ground in and above and around it to sink into it. If it happens near one of the footers for the boardwalk. And it could be a catastrophic failure of the boardwalk, and now we're out of boardwalk for a period of time to try to rehab it. Thus, the urgency of that. Could it last another year? Yeah, maybe, but is that worth the risk for that? In my mind, no. So that's why that's on there. And then you add the Delaware Avenue. We have sinkhole, we know already on that one. So that's why that is there. The other comment on the trash truck, it is a new truck. It is not an additional truck. It is a replacement vehicle for us to be able to maintain the level of service that we currently provide.
That's helpful,
Right.
actually.
And the other truck is
And I think
gone.
you've been asking for that for a few years, for that same truck. And we've been stretching it.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah.
We have.
Last year, it was, actually, it was titled Cobra Trash Truck. And the intention was get a smaller trash truck that would be able to do citywide trash collections, but would also be able to handle the boardwalk. And then there was a lot of discussions about removing the trash truck from the boardwalk, and in that case, the project was deferred. One of the things that I had done, I think it was on the last iteration of the CIP, and I can include it in the next one, would essentially be a column that includes everything that was a carryover project, a continuous project, in that it's ongoing year to year, or that would be a new project. And one of the things that you'll see is a majority of the projects right now that we have in the streets department that are labeled urgent or essential are carryover projects, and then they're also continuational projects. In some of the other departments, for example, wastewater and water, they were not carryover or deferred projects. They're new projects as a result of the studies that have been going on with those systems. So I'll include that column in the next iteration of the CIP.
And I think that would be helpful to address your issues, Commissioner. Also, I just want to note for you this tie-in from number 14 on Delaware Avenue. That sinkhole has been patched for a couple of years now. So this is, we're not looking at, and we are looking at an immediate issue, but we've been taking care of it for as long as I think that we should. So we need to improve that. I mean, major infrastructure improvement like this is certainly costly, but what's behind that and how is everything else affected to that? As Kevin points out, a catastrophic, we don't want that. We had that a few years ago. The timing with the hurricane that brought up the end of the northern end of the boardwalk, and we repaired that, and we were able to pay for that with FEMA funding. That's certainly good, but we need to address some of these that have been deferred maintenance for a long, long time.
Well, I see this as, from my point of view, critical with respect to the potential for damage. I don't know how many remember when were doing the beach replenishment project many years ago, about, 6 years ago? And I don't know if it's the same storm drain or not, but the storm drain over at Delaware Avenue clogged and backed up and filled water in all the underground parking garages, et cetera, not to mention the erosion and stuff. So I think, again, there's a great potential for damage. I don't disagree with this. I think this needs to be done, yeah.
This discussion is very helpful for me, being new to the budget process. And, it's clear, like in so many things, that while there are priorities set one year, as we gain new information, new data, that's going to change that for the next year. And with Director of Public Works having come on and having moved this process ahead and helping us gain a lot more information as to some of these maintenance situations, bump them up. That's not to say that paving isn't still critically important, but now we've got these risk management kinds of things, so to speak, that are definitely a priority.
And again, you never know what is going to happen. As you're speaking, Commissioner Byrne, you'll recall the 2 years ago in December when the embankment near your house fell into the canal. So that was a costly.
Unplanned events that,
Exactly, exactly.
have to be dealt with immediately,
Right, right. And then just briefly to talk about the expense side of the budget with personnel, because we have a lot of turnover this year, just so you commissioners are aware, we're not necessarily replacing all of the individuals, but the key individuals that we certainly need for operational integrity of each department, I'll say. So Kevin right now is interviewing. We have one brand-new individual, a staff person in the city mechanic shop. And Bill, as you know, Bill Schuyler is retiring April 30th. So we need to have a lead mechanic replaced there if we're going to continue that, work that we do, which for all intents and purposes, the department heads are very keen on keeping for many different reasons. But there's a lot of that personnel type situations that are, with folks leaving, hiring people at a lower salary. We just had a 40-plus employee leave. So certainly, he was up there in the pay scale based on longevity, and we won't necessarily be hiring somebody in. So there's that difference in personnel costs that you won't necessarily see, but we can point that out to you in the budget for each department. 5 people in the wastewater department is big, with only 11. So that's 50% of the workforce almost. Just wanted, so we're in the process of doing that. I didn't want you to think that these people are leaving and we're not paying, we're certainly paying attention to it.
No, I appreciate hearing that. And I appreciate hearing any ways that we can, that you're trying to be frugal and save money and reduce costs and everything. I think that's number one thing for me, is making sure we're paying the right amount on things before we go to raising more revenues. I'm always caught every year with the challenge of raising funding. Do we really need it? I really know we absolutely need projects done, and you've got to have money to pay for them. So if we can't be frugal enough to save $2 million a year, then we need to come up with new funds. But it's always been challenging for me in raising funds because we've got such a limited number of funding sources. One of our funding sources is line item is Beach Patrol donations. Well, there's nothing we can do to quadruple their donations to help feed their projects and everything. But we can certainly look at things like the parking revenue, taxes, property tax, rental tax. What else is there? Transfer tax type of thing. And so maybe that's a segue into your discussion. Maybe we have a generic discussion without settling anything today. But,
Well, you mentioned property taxes, and I would like to, Bert, you probably know this. When was the last time property taxes were raised?
I believe, I'm going to say, I don't know for sure, Commissioner, but I think it was around 2012. When we did that, we were doing it for the building, to set aside, we actually reserved a percentage of those property taxes for the building construction. So,
But we did increase them some percentage, I'm assuming.
Well,
You did, it wasn't,
yes.
there
No.
was not some sort of line item saying that this is going towards.
well,
the-
it kind of was, in that you raise property taxes, and I know there's always a reluctance to do that, but you raised it and stated the reason that you were raising it, and that was for the building project. So we even identified on the financial statements in the funds section that we were reserving, we raised those taxes, and we were putting it aside for the city hall
Well,
building.
From my standpoint, the deferred maintenance over years and years, I was a commissioner between 2007 and 2013, and we weren't funding the kinds of things that we now have to fund. They all have piled up on us. And I think it's every bit, perhaps even more important than, the building. We have to do these things. There's just no way around it.
Yeah, and I look at the taxes. When did we do the assessment? Was that like 5 years ago?
14.
14. Because the assessment was done, there was no raise in the taxes. It was kind of a zero-sum game. But I think the actual, if you look back at the revenue from taxes, I don't know that it's that much different in the last 10 years. I mean, and I think if we did raise it in 2012, it must have been a pretty small number. I don't know.
I recall it was about 15% increase when we
Okay,
did that.
that much.
And,
Okay.
but that's not a lot when you look.
No,
at-
it's not a lot, given
Well-
where most of the taxes are.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, if you just look at our general fund revenue and our taxes that you have budgeted and based on your actual in the last 2 years, it's basically 8.5 or 9% of the budget. And that doesn't include wastewater and water. That's just the general fund budget. Whereas, parking is more in the neighborhood of like 35%. And with fines, it's close to 40%. So, I mean, we do get people, and I know all of us have heard about it, saying, geez, are these taxes by the month or are they by the year? And I don't think that's a reason to raise the taxes at all. But I think, it's something that we've got to focus on because these infrastructure projects are not just next year. It's going
Yeah,
to
I
be
think
something that we have to look at.
We have to
over
look
a
at something much larger than 15%.
Yeah.
From my view, I have some thoughts in mind, but something else that I thought, and I just wanted to throw this out to the commissioners, and you can tell me what you think about it. There are a variety of states and municipalities who charge higher taxes to people who are not residents. So in other words, people who are second homeowners would be a higher tax. They do it in Florida. They call it a homestead
Yeah.
tax or something like that. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. Part of me thinks just raising them across the board might make sense, but I might be able to be convinced otherwise.
I mean, that sounds like something to maybe consider, over time, especially. I mean, I think, just in general, our taxes probably should go up, gradually over the next 3 to 4 years. I don't know what those percentages are, but then simultaneously, we could build something like that into it, or maybe a fee of some kind for.
Well, we're
the
looking
other-
at $2.1 million of additional capital expenditures. I think slowly making them go up is not going to help
Well,
us
no,
today.
Slowly in my mind is, right now, I think our taxes are 0.4 mils or 4 mils or something,
Point
per
of,
100.
4 cents per 100.
4 cents per 100. If we went up 1 cent per 100 for the next 4 years, that's 25% a year, but it gets us up 100% in 4 years. Or we could do, a third, a third, a third, something like that.
But in real dollars, what does 25% give us?
350, 400,000.
Yeah.
I mean, I realize that. I mean,
Yeah.
if we went 100%, all we're going to get is $1.3 million.
Right, no, I
And I'm
understand
not
that
saying we
too.
go 100%. I was thinking, along the same lines, some of the things that we're looking at, and again, for planning for the future, we've got some stormwater issues for the next, 20 years. A lot of municipalities have a stormwater fund, I think I saw something, I think Lewis, it's like $5 or $10 a year, but doesn't seem like it's gonna be much. But, some, I think municipalities have stormwater fees based on frontage maybe or something.
Yeah,
I'm not sure
that's right.
exactly.
Impervious surface?
Impervious surface, stuff like that. And, having something like that could lead us into thoughts about our zoning code or our building code, because, hey, if people are gonna have more pervious surfaces, versus impervious. I mean, I look at our parking lot out there. Have you guys ever seen that? It's amazing. You know, like you see water running down the middle, but where the parking spaces are, where it's pervious, just goes right through.
Right.
I mean, I think sand goes through there too, so that's not the greatest thing. But, you know, it's something to think about, a stormwater fee, because that's something that we could set aside specifically for stormwater. But it would have to be a lot to handle what we have to handle over the next 10 years.
Well, my recollection is I brought that up last year, and I thought you all were working on that. 'Cause to me, it ought to be ready now. Look, we've got, what's the total of stormwater projects? Just Bayard alone is almost $1 million, probably with engineering fees. So we've got multi-million-dollar projects there that could be paid by a dedicated stormwater tax fee. And then that way, the money that is planned to go to that can go to some of these other projects. So I'd like to see us light a match under ourselves and see if we can look at instituting
I
that.
support that idea.
Yes.
The other thing is, back to property taxes. I don't remember, I think it was you, Sharon, or it was Greg, did like a 20-year history of property taxes. Do you recall doing something like that? That
I did not
showed
do that.
us, you know, how many, during what years the property tax, what it was, and when it was increased. And I think that might be beneficial for us.
I can give you the last 5 years.
Start with that, yeah.
Yeah.
In the last 5 years, probably
So actually,
once only, I would think.
last year, during the budget cycle, one of the things I prepared, some of you might recall, was the chart of fees, which essentially looked at what an increase in revenues for anything from property taxes to business licenses, trash, building permits, et cetera. So for the property tax analysis, I went back to 2011-12, that fiscal year. At that time, the rate was $1.78 per every $100 of assessed value. Then in 2014, the reassessment took place and the property tax was lowered, I think, to kind of balance out, so there was really no increase. So for a while, there was a slight increase in revenue, and then there was actually a decrease in revenue for about 2 years, and then it slowly started to go up since then. So in 2011-12, the property tax revenue was 1.3 million. The last year, if I have the number correct, the property tax revenue was 1.33. So a difference in the last 7 years of about $23,000 in property tax revenue.
Which is,
Nothing.
which may not be related to a property tax increase.
No, he said the last one was 12, was the last actual tax increase. And then in 14, remember, we went from 1.78 to 0.4 because of the assessments. And it was done in such a way to make a zero-sum game, so that really,
Well, 24, I know, it was neutral.
yeah.
But what was it prior to $1.70,
But
1.78
yeah.
cents
We don't
per
have that, but
that
we
I
can-
100?
we can
That's
get
what I'd like to
Yeah.
know. You know, because I think our history in the last 20 years since I've been here, I think we've had one property tax increase, maybe two, I don't know, but I'd like
Hasn't
to
been-
know what that is. I think that's a
So-
valuable number to have.
I can only compare things to, I have another property and it's in Florida. And I can tell you, I get tax increases every single year. And, you know, the reason why you get tax increases every single year is, well, we pay our employees a cost of living increase. And then there's the infrastructure. Our taxes have been kept artificially low to not raise taxes. It has made absolutely zero sense to me since I was a commissioner in 2007. And, you know, that's just got to stop. We have to be able to fund this deferred maintenance. We can't wait. I mean, 3 weeks ago, up the street from me, you know, water main breaks. We have water main breaks all over the city. That's ridiculous.
Well, you know, also, I would think if you look back at your last 10 years of county tax rates, I guarantee you they've gone up every year,
Oh, yeah,
you know?
they definitely have.
It's just what happens. I think most municipalities, it's just something that they do because that's a steady stream of revenue that they need for the infrastructure and whatnot.
So that would be a good secondary research project for
Well, I was just going to actually,
county. And
yeah, I was also going to ask if we could resurface the chart of fees. I think that was the one, if I recall, where you showed if a certain fee increased by X amount would bring in additional X amount of revenue. I thought that was really helpful to have that chart as we're having this discussion.
Oh, you said
A chart of fees. Between Evan and Bert, they did it last year. I think Bert.
Evan did that.
Yeah, where we were able to see if you raised property, I think if you raised property taxes by, I don't know, 10%, you'd bring in this much revenue, 20%, 30%. I thought that was really helpful to see, what the impacts of revenue increases were. So if we could get that again, that'd be really
So,
helpful.
Another thing that I've been looking at is these lease agreements that we have. We're going to be talking about a lease agreement later, but I'm talking about specifically, it doesn't make sense to me for a lot of these to be charging people $10 a year. I don't understand that. There's only a couple where we actually get income that makes sense, and I think one of them is Snyder's. Is that 22 Rehoboth?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a large piece of property, too.
you can't really, you need to exclude those.
Yeah.
Those
No,
two
I
because
understand.
They're rentals of land,
Right.
not licenses.
But I just look at this list that I have in front of me that I asked the city manager to send to me, and I think we could, maybe it's not a huge amount of money, but when I look at if I can look at some of these smaller things, like the LED retrofit project, that's a deferrable thing, but just for example, we're $45,000. Is there a way we can find $45,000 to do a project like that? Or the Big Belly for $35,000, I think that's what it is. So, I've found a lot of smaller pieces. Like, for example, I was looking at the budget report for Grove Park. Where is it? We were expecting to get $750, but we only got $100. And boy, we sure raised the rates in bandstand and weddings, and people like to use Grove Park. Here's another place where maybe we'd only end up getting $5,000 or $6,000, but they do add up. And I don't think just keeping that low, I know that the farmer's market pays $100 to use Grove Park. Maybe we should be paying $500.
We'll leave that to you.
That's me.
You figure that out.
So I'm fine with that. I'm fine personally with
Those
doubling.
seasonal
Yeah,
fees?
Yeah,
Not weekly?
no, seasonal.
Right, okay.
But it's a nonprofit.
We're a nonprofit. We're not making any money. So I have a list, and maybe what I should do for next time, or we can talk about now. I don't know how you want to do it, but I have a list of things I think where we could increase fees, like those
Did
things.
that leasing,
It's almost
did
like they've
that
been
list of
forgotten.
leasing go out to everybody? I don't recall seeing it, so
No,
it'd be helpful.
No,
Page thing, right?
yeah, I didn't get it. I asked the city manager for it the other day, and she said, she thought she had sent it out, but it turns out I think she only sent it to you, Paul.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Yeah, because I didn't get a copy, and Stan didn't get a copy.
Yeah, I
just
didn't-
sent
I
him a
didn't either.
copy.
No, I didn't
So,
see it.
we'll
We had
ask her
talked
to s-
about this at the workshop 2 weeks ago,
Yeah.
about wouldn't it be nice to get a
Be
list
great.
of all of the fees
Well, I
that
can
are
forward it to everybody. I have it right in front of me.
paid
All right,
for
Yeah, I'll do that right now. So,
I'd like to see does that have the list of all the property we own across town as well? I'd just like to see that. I have no idea if that's
no,
even,
this is not quite like
The-
that.
the
There's
property
probably
that
some
we
Yeah.
of it.
actually rent or lease.
yeah.
There's some
Oh,
things,
okay.
but there's for
Okay.
example, so 28 Baltimore, a lease agreement for an encroaching wooden deck on Baltimore is $10 a year.
Well,
Remember, I had asked to
coming-
have this on the February workshop
Yep,
and
I
to
think
have all
that's what
this
it is.
information distributed so that we can talk
and
about it.
Glenn's
Okay.
planning on doing that.
That's fine.
February workshop.
And remember, we're going to discuss a lease on 45 and 45 and a half today that actually has a lease agreement, but actually has a fee for the space. as
I
well.
didn't see that on here.
That's not on that list, but it's on our agenda for today.
And do we get income for 306 Rehoboth Avenue from the chamber?
Yeah, it should be on there. It's like
I don't
40
see
or
it.
something thousand, 306.
And that's just that's called the lease to rent a building known as the railroad station. That's the
Yeah,
visitor center.
I don't think they pay that for that railroad station. I think the railroad station is like $1 lease, kind of like the museum.
Yeah. well,
Whereas they do rent the other one. I think that's
So
what they're in.
I think we need to get to the bottom of all this. I do.
Sharon, you were out of the room. For the February workshop, if we can send out a list of all the leases that we have within city, licenses,
License
excuse me.
agreement and leases,
Yeah,
probably.
and I think they're all on there.
Well,
Things like, just so I make sure it's comprehensive, things like on, I think it's Kent Street, there's a property owned, I think, by the city that gets leased out to, I don't know, some auxiliary or whatever. So things like, yeah,
Kiwanis,
Kiwanis,
they
so
pay
things like that are
$5
on the
a year.
lease. How much?
$5.
$5 a year.
Okay, so that is what will be on the list. Thank you, that's what I was asking.
And I think when Commissioner Calusi brings up, when we look at the smaller projects that are really not classified as essential or urgent, there's one that I want to bring back to the discussion point possibly, and that's the merge project.
Yeah.
It's $30,000, and it doesn't have to be connected to what they're doing on Route 1. And to me, if we all had a consensus, and maybe we do, maybe we don't, that traffic management in Rehoboth is essential for us, then to me, the merge project, until we direct people of how to maneuver around our city for what they want to do, is, to me, being, what is that old saying? Pound foolish, penny wise and pound foolish.
I absolutely agree with that. I do. Yeah, I agree with that. Because it's
Because I know we've got it deferred, but once again.
Well, and I think we should find money to do that. And here's the other thing for me, and this is one of the projects that I've been talking about, and one of the reasons I talked about when I was running for office, and that is the circulator bus. We would have to subsidize that project.
Meaning
to
the
start.
Jolly Trolley
Yes,
initiative?
that initiative. So I like to find money for that. I would not say at this point how much money that would be, because it's a competitive situation and that we were asked not to disclose that. But I'd like to find the money for that as well. So, and the reason too is the potential for directing people around town, dealing with our parking whole situation. It's important. I mean, it may be what you consider desirable, but in a lot of ways, it's critical. Yes. So anyway.
I agree with all that. But just don't lose sight of the bigger picture of $3 million versus these little things. And I'm not saying not the little things. I think the little things are very important too, but we're talking probably $3 million. One thing I'd like to bring to your attention, and this happened, and only a couple of us were up here at the time, I think 3 years ago. We were talking in the budget process, and maybe it's in 16, I'm not sure. And the city manager came to us with the way to balance the budget at the time was to raise the rental tax. And, at that point in time, if we were to raise it from 3 to 6%, it would actually, raise $1 million or so. And the commissioners chose not to do that at that point in time. And the commissioners chose instead to go into the general fund and take out over a little bit more than $1 million. Since then, we have raised the rental tax, but just want to make you aware that since then, we have also paid that $1 million back. So, I mean, that, and I'm not saying let's just go take the money out of the general fund, who cares? But as a last item, that could be something because, again, we did pay it back. That was paid back through surpluses. And, you know, if we're looking at the possibility of raising revenues over, just like we're going to need capital improvement over the next 3 to 5 years, and we may raise revenues in a staggered fashion over the next 3 or 5 years, I would think there's the possibilities of paying that back, just as we've done over the last 3 years. Just a thought. Sorry,
Okay.
did I interrupt you, Stanley?
No,
I'm
no,
sorry.
not me.
You know, as we talk about property taxes, I'd suggest we be mindful that we had the fire department come to us. So this is not really a way to finance or fund our projects. So it's a little aside, but if you recall, the fire department came to us some time ago and asked for a dedicated line of funding. Their suggestion was to tack a percentage onto the building permit. I think most people were probably receptive to that. I was quite vocal in that I thought that that if we did that a more constant, steady stream of funding would be to tack a little percentage on the property tax or something, so they had a dedicated amount on a yearly basis. I would just ask you to keep in mind that as we talk about property tax, that we give that consideration. All right, thank you.
So is there any direction particular that
Find $3 million.
Yeah.
you want us to go?
I
Yeah.
was just going to wonder, is that really the bottom line of where we are? That we need to understand what we would have to do to find $3 million?
Or to defer, and in absence of that, to defer on some of the projects that are labeled essential and urgent.
But I think we don't, I think we have to be really careful about that. And if, maybe we don't use the whole $1 million, but maybe we use half of that to the 500,000 to subsidize, and maybe we'll have to leave a couple of them behind. But I think we need to be very careful about, and you've just sat there and talked about that for several minutes about how we keep deferring, and we can't keep doing that.
So presently, with the removal of the hotel occupancy tax, we have a capital improvement plan of $1,768, $1,768,579. 458 of that, so is the parking, so then we're down to 1.2. In order to, again, just put the yellow highlighted areas in here, I'll be looking at the expense side of the budget to replace that $855,000. The first things that I would, just, and we played around a little with this, but, removing the additional attendance for $80,000, removing the seasonal folks. That probably would give us $150,000. Still looking for another $700,000. I can look and I can, again, keep the budget flat from this year to next year. And that includes all the operating in each department. That's the only thing I can do right now.
I'm
unless-
not sure that's a worthwhile exercise, frankly.
No.
Well, I would suggest that you focus on some of these revenues that we've just been talking about and building that into your budget, like
Happy to do that. and we'll com-
I disagree
property
with building it in the budget, giving us a chart of what the potential income is if we increase property tax by this, if we do this, if we do that, if we implement a stormwater tax, what is the potential for revenue? If we change the lease agreements, what is the potential? I don't mind a chart of accounts, but again, just like the accommodations tax, I don't want to see it built into the.
Well, and I would like to counter that about the accommodations tax, because to me, the message that I think we do not want to send to our community is that everything we're looking at would be on the backs of our residents. That to me, there's an opportunity here to characterize if we were to get approval to even have an accommodations tax, and if we decided to pull the trigger on that, then that dollar amount for our consideration is, what was it, $855?
Yeah,
Well, that's for not the entire year.
it's semantics in some ways.
I think it's just the packaging. It's,
Yeah, it's a
It
package.
is, it is, because to me, one of our fundamentals should be that as we look at additional revenue, it needs to come from all interested parties, and everybody has skin in this game.
right, and everybody who benefits.
Yes.
And so I agree 100% with what you just said, but I like the packaging, the way that Commissioner Mills mentioned it, which is, let's not muddy the water on the draft budget, but let's look at what is currently, based on the priorities, what is not able to be funded, and then you have this additional list of revenue sources in some type of a chart that says if the fee is this, the potential revenue is this, if the fee is this, the potential revenue is this. And then have that to kind of look at where the holes are and what actions we could take to access those revenue sources.
Yes, and however,
And then how we would prioritize the expenditures.
however we do that, it needs, to me, just to convey,
Yes.
all stakeholders need to be involved.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I think
I
that
think
message can get out of there without putting it in the budget. Again,
Yeah.
the message to me that I hear when it's in the budget is that 3% is a done deal as soon as the charter comes
Right.
back.
Okay.
That's what I'm hearing. Whereas what you just said, I think, and you all just said, I think is the perfect message to
Okay.
get out there. We are considering looking at all these other
Yes.
sources of revenue,
Right.
including property tax, including potentially a rental tax, hotel accommodation tax, potentially a stormwater tax. I mean, that's the right message.
Yeah.
I fully agree with that. We don't want to take the hotel tax for granted. We don't want to send that message. Once it becomes law, then it's an opportunity for us to look at up to 3%. In a practical way, it's truly a user's tax. The guests that come into our town that use all of the public facilities here are costing us a lot.
Right.
And that $855,000 a year, more or less, can help cover those costs. I'm sure it doesn't cover all of them.
No, some.
And Commissioners,
I do, oh, please, Kevin, go ahead.
I was just
You
going to
ahead.
say, along with that, I think we could give you, at various intervals, every 500,000 or whatever, which of those CIP projects we would recommend moving over into the funded column. So you could say, well, if we get 500,000, boom, we do those 5. If we get $1 million, we could do these 8, whatever, but give you something to refer
That would be
against
really-
to how much that money you're able to raise.
And then not to forget what Commissioner Calusi said, which is, what are we doing to apply for grants that could also help pay for some of these expenses?
Kevin?
If they're ones that are deferred or they're, not essential, but still, they're on this list. If they're on this list, it's something that's desirable. And if we can get them for free, hey, that's great. Or some funding towards them.
I don't know how that helps the budget. Seems to me you've got to dedicate money and put them in the budget, and then hopefully you secure grants that then relieve you
Right, but
those
I,
funds for other projects.
but I think the intent is just to capture the data and then, see what, I don't think there's any argument, but I think it would be good information to have as to what the potential might be.
Kevin, on line 19, I forgot to ask this a little earlier. There's a roof replacement. Is that a roof that is in jeopardy of collapse?
I would say not collapse. We had leaks and that kind of thing. So is it a healthy, good working environment? No. Is it a life safety thing? I would say no, or I would have put it as urgent.
Okay.
So
It was already leaking on some electrical work,
Yeah,
but,
so we,
but we fixed that. So now it's
we
just
put
the-
another Band-Aid out there.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was a carryover from last year.
On these leases, you might want to consider the fact that they're typically multi-year leases, such as the Snyder's lease. We don't have any flexibility this year because it's still in effect. I think the first year is next year. And when we do establish a lease, we do have escalation clauses in there for moderate increases during the 5-year period. So I think, I really don't think there's tremendous revenue raising potential this year for the leases, but I could be wrong because some of these small ones, I think you're really paying for easements and,
that's exactly
and I don't know that you can raise a lot of revenue from that.
Well, we will include that, but the larger increases certainly, come from property taxes. About 25%, as the mayor said, is maybe 350,000. And then the occupancy tax, that still doesn't give us, where we need to be. But we'll put that all together for you. And see where we can go next time.
Before we finish, I wanted to ask, maybe I'm overlooking at them. Typically, we've always gotten letters from the fire department and those seeking donations, if you
Yep.
will. Have we received those and been
Yes,
distributed?
and they're in your budget book under contributions.
This one I handed out today is
The
not.
letter, yeah, the clear space reminded me that I wanted to put it in there under,
Contributions.
It's all the way in the back.
Second to the end, yeah.
contribution.
And there.
I don't have any letters from the agencies, though.
Okay,
We've always gotten letters from the agencies on their letterheads specifying the why and how much. and-
we have them. I will include them for you. We
Okay,
have all of them.
thank you.
I can tell you what's budgeted.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
That's on
Okay.
that page.
So that is under your tab if you do have your budget, but actually it's probably modified by now, but the Rehoboth Beach Historical Society, we're budgeting $38,685. That includes some painting and detail that needs to be done.
Is that the museum? Museum?
Well, see, that's why I'd like the letter, because that's what, an increase of $13,000.
Okay.
I need to hear,
Um,
what are they asking for?
The fire donation, we increased from 60,200. We usually give them 30,000, and then we pay for some capital items. We increased that 60,000 to 80,000.
Walter, Warren, Warren's happy.
The Main Street requested 50,000. We put that in the budget,
50?
50.
That's what they had last year, right?
It only shows
I have
25.
25,000.
25 here, isn't it?
Well, no, we modified that. So we didn't get their letter when this was done, so we modified it to 50,000.
All right.
Well, I want to have more discussion when we get these letters.
Well, we will get them to you.
Anything else? Anybody?
And the library's in there as well, so we'll get you all of that.
Anything else, Sharon, you need? All right, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate all your help.
I've got it all.
I'll tell you, I think I'm gonna get smarter. I think I'm gonna get smarter. Just sit next to you.
Hey, Evan,
No, I'm not just,
Evan,
I'm
did
not
you
just
put these
kidding.
together?
I'm serious about that.
These folders with our names on it, or did
I
Ann?
did not, no,
Okay,
that was
must
probably
be Ann.
Margaret or Ann, yeah.
Oh, Margaret.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Say what?